afraid to because I'm like you, I'm a contact guy.
Yeah, me
I
too,
don't
and
wanna
I
get
have
that.
this one, it's kinda like, you know, it's my last pair too.
Yeah, these are a couple of years old.
Alright, so we're gonna go live here in a minute.
Cynthia, it's Ben and the budget committee. You're dialing in remotely.
Hi.
Hey, how you doing?
Hello.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Cynthia, how are you?
If the link is static like that, just lower the volume.
Okay.
Jim, are we on?
I'm waiting for confirmation.
I'll close the doors. It's a little
So,
quieter.
Usually about 30 seconds to a minute behind.
You can hear us good, Cynthia?
Yes, I can.
Okay, cool. Alright, anybody else need more, IT?
We are live.
Okay.
Okay, I will call the previously scheduled Budget and Finance Committee to order. Doing a roll call, I see Alderman Novak and Alderman Lennon here. We're also joined by City Administrator Ruth Sabatrini, Ben Daish, and our IT Department Director, Jim Franks. So with the meeting called to order, I will open up to public comment. Seeing nobody in the audience and hearing nobody online, I'll give it another few seconds. Okay, and hearing no public comment, I will move on to the city department budget presentations. We are gonna change the order from recreations, buildings, and IT. We will have the IT department present first. So with that, I will turn it over to Ben Daish and Jim Franks.
Thank you, Alderman Santoy, and the IT budget projection. We are looking right now at the budget worksheet report that reflects transaction activity from 2017 through 2019 and the budget of 2020. There's also a column indicating where the actual amounts for 2020 are compared to the budget. First, we'll get into the salaries, and Jim will elaborate further. Our salary and related costs are indicative of our current roster for the IT department. And Jim, if you want to have any further comment on the staffing?
Oh, sure. There's no anticipated growth in staff for 2021. Those numbers just reflect changes in benefit costs and other internal costs. So we are not looking at expanding any staff. But just to step back 1 second so everybody understands the package of information that I provided. There's essentially 3 documents in this packet. The first is a brief summary of the significant changes I'm proposing for the department's budget in 2021. So at some point I want to go through these 5 bullet points and just explain my reasoning behind why they're in there. The second is the document Ben is referring to, which is the expenditures going back to 2017 as well as anticipated to 2024. The third is a little unique to mine. In order for me to keep track internally throughout the course of the year, I take each of my general ledger accounts, my expenditure accounts, and I subdivide them based on the primary expenditures that comprise the account. So I put this document together beginning last year, and I wanted to give the committee here an updated copy of it because it helps you understand what exactly my general accounts are and how that money is broken up and where those expenditures go. So we don't have to dive through it all right now, but if you're ever curious about what exactly hardware maintenance is, this sub-document that's provided gives you a pretty detailed breakdown on the major components of expense that comprise that account. And I have all that in place for the expenditure account that comprise my department. So if we want to start with salary, as mentioned, there's no anticipated change or growth. If anything, we're seeing a little bit of a reduction because we had a couple of temporary part-time staffers involved in our department this year that came on board while other employees were on maternity leave. Those are being phased out. So we're actually seeing a decrease in by the end of 2021 as far as personnel numbers. Should we skip down to expenditures, Ben, or where do we go from there?
With regard to salary-related expenditures, again, as I mentioned in previous meetings, the benefits for health insurance, right now we're projecting a 5% increase, but that is subject to change. We normally get our quotes from our healthcare providers sometime around February. The city has been able to negotiate favorable terms in recent years where the cost increases have been within 5%. Same with dental and life, we're projecting a conservative 10% increase, but the true increase is yet to be determined sometime early next year. The other categories with regard to IMRF and FICA and Medicare, that's all predicated based on the salary levels. Jim, if we want to get further into the other general operating expenditures.
Oh, sure, I don't have that many, so we can go one by one.
Yeah.
The first account on here is labeled as 5210, it's vehicle, oil, and gas. I know this is an issue that comes up in the larger departments, how many vehicles are out there. We essentially have one vehicle. The vehicle stays parked on city properties 24/7, 365, no one takes it home. It's used internally as we commute between buildings, performing functions for the department. So we have one vehicle, that money that's allocated in there pays for oil changes and the occasional flat or any sort of maintenance that goes on in terms of keeping that one vehicle.
So it's a pool vehicle.
Exactly. It's actually inherited from the police, so as they upgrade, this is an old DC's car, so it wasn't purchased new, it was a hand-me-down, but it still runs, and it's an SUV, so it's got ample room for us to move equipment, and that's all we use it for. But the key point is no one has any take-home vehicles, there's nothing that goes on like that here, there's just that one for use internally. Training dues and publications. This typically comprises internal staff training. There is a difference, it's the first bullet point on the first page of this presentation. In 2020, we began a cybersecurity awareness training initiative. People here at the table, Chuck, Ruth, and Ben, have gone through this program. It's essentially web-based training that allows our staff and trains our staff to make good decisions with respect to their online, internet, and web use. That comes at a cost. So the costs for that are included in the 2020 budget to continue the Know-Before is the name of the provider, cyber awareness training. We've got almost all of our city staff trained to the bare minimum specifications for 2020. There's a few still in the fire department that haven't completed yet, but over the course of 1 year, I've trained over 500 something full-time employees. So I'm very proud of that, and it's a major initiative in keeping our environment safe.
Yeah, it's a very valuable asset to do that, because especially over the last year, I don't know if you've seen in the news, you've seen a lot more cybercrime, and they've actually been targeting the municipalities, and thankfully, the majority of all council members, when I put forward the cybercrime insurance, you get the majority voted except for one alderman who didn't. So that's very important, and the initiative that he's taking, making sure that all of our employees throughout the city know the basics. That way, because usually it's just opening one little click for an email, and it basically tells us what to look for, what might look suspicious. Reach out to IT right away if you see something.
Right,
So,
it's designed to empower staff to make good decisions when they get that questionable email that we've all seen, where it might show a name, for example, of someone you know personally, but it's a malicious payload is the term in the industry. So if you click that link, you could cause serious problems. So the training provides the right knowledge foundations to inform users to ensure that they do the right thing. So
and with COVID, everything's going more online than anything, so it's more important now than ever.
In the training aspects, it covers things that we never even realized going through. There's certain things we already know, but it goes one step beyond, I can attest to that.
well, we don't have to spend too much time on it, but one point to note in finance, and it's where I've seen it the most, we are starting to see what are called branded or customized phishing attacks. In other words, people claiming to be other employees of the city contacting finance and saying, I need you to make a ACH change on my payroll. But they're not really so-and-so. I know Ben has seen those, and we've seen them in other offices of finance where this is real world. This is people learning our staff, branding their attacks to who we are, and trying to get in there for that fast change so they can, earn some money on the side. So
Last question, are you gonna set it up for the aldermen so they get to do the training also?
it can be, the condition of the license is the trainee has to have a CI.1 account, which we can afford to all the aldermen if they choose to, and as long as I can create them. Some already do, I usually leave it up to them to decide.
Okay.
But as long as we can create a city account for them through our domain,
Yeah.
they are eligible to go through this training as well, so.
Yeah, I highly recommend it.
No.
There's no additional
I'd be
cost.
interested.
Yeah, it's a site license, so whether we have 200 users or 2,000 users, that's our cost per year.
Okay.
Okay, so, supplies, Basic office supplies, there's really not much to say there. We try to do everything as digitally and electronically as possible, but, you know, we still have memos to write and certain things that require, ink approval, so that effectively remains unchanged, throughout the course of next year. Other general expenses, 5290. And the 5290-30. The reason why those are separated is that beginning last year, the city's IT department took over management responsibilities for all IT matters at the Berlin Development Corporation. So the BDC was spending a very large amount of money per year with a couple of third-party contractors. And after we sat down and crunched the numbers, we realized that we could provide the same services to the BDC at a much greater savings costs. So that's where those lines find their, especially that second line, that's where it finds its foundation. The next change, going back to the first page, is during the course of 2020, we realized that while we budgeted just over $20,000 for expenditures related to their operation, they by no means required that much money to be budgeted. But where I am seeing a usage, an increase in usage, is in the user support. So those couple of part-time folks that I have been, sometimes, some cases, spending more hours of their day continuing to support that location. They require a lot of hands-on support. So what I'm requesting is, as opposed to an increase in the budget, we are going to reduce that line down approximately 20,000 and then transfer it behind the scenes to where Ben stores our salaries. So we have funding in there just to account for any part-timers that pick up extra hours without throwing off our numbers. This is not a creation of a new position. This is sort of a background contribution. And Ben can speak more to how departments do this. I have a few other positions in my department that are co-funded by other departments. It's just how we account for things across the board. So that's the second point.
Are we looking, I know there was talk before about adding more than just the BDC to that network, if it comes to, say, township or.
There have been a couple of brief discussions with the new health department president about us being involved in that operation. I expressed some concerns though, because, how do I say it? It's unknown at this point what shape the operation is, technically speaking, at the health department in the township. Whereas the BDC, we were able to go over there and spend 4 hours evaluating, and I had a very clear idea of the state of their operation.
Sure.
There's too many unknowns. So what I'd say is in 2021, if we have the opportunity, I'd like to evaluate that location and see if it's one that we can bring in, if we have the support of the township president, the health department president, and all the other folks that make the decisions over there. So it's something that's been in my sights because we can certainly save them money, especially in areas like equipment purchases and phones and copiers, where those contracts get bid out, and the broader range your bid scope is, the more every individual unit's cost is decreased. So the idea is by scale, we can save everybody money. So that is on the agenda for me, but I want to see where the pieces fall next year. In this account though, this supplies account 5290, last year we had budgeted approximately $25,000 for the redevelopment of the city's website. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, most of that money was reallocated into emergency operations, preparing for our business procedures and processes to be modified to accommodate staff working remotely and all the other things that we've all dealt with since March. With 2021, I'd like to revisit funding the redevelopment of our website, because I think we can all agree it's 6-7 years old, it needs a facelift. There are issues with the functionality of it. There's a lot to the organization of a website that far extend beyond my department. So my request, according to this highlights page, is I want to eliminate this money, this $25,000, from my department and transfer it into the city administrator's office budget. That's because, as the city administrator, all of us as sub-departments report to that office. So it makes sense when we're sitting down designing a citywide website that has ramifications in building in all of our departments, that it comes from the city administrator's office as we work to modify our procedures and processes to accommodate new services on the website.
Quick question, Jim. So this professional service line item?
Yes.
Okay, so this year we had 25,000, and next year it should just go down to.
Well, it's a little bit more complicated than that.
Yeah, that's
It's
what I was
taken from two
asking.
accounts. We're removing 10,000 from 5,300 and 15,000 from 5,510.
Okay, so 5510.
Because there's other miscellaneous purchases.
15,000 and, okay, 10,000 from 5,300.
Right, there's ancillary purchases that get involved when you start redesigning websites, so it's not all general. to come up with that figure on reallocating funds, reducing from two of my lines, requesting finance transfer that to the city administrator's budget, so.
Okay, then quick question for you. So that's 25,000 for a website, but how much does a website cost?
It would depend on the scale and the scope.
If we want a good one, because we want to make sure that it's done correctly, that way we don't have to revisit it every single year.
The way I see this coming together is when we sit down and look at the goals for next year, we decide whether it's a committee or a commission or some form of management authority comprised of staff, elected officials, residents, however we choose to do this. And then we can determine the goals of that redesign. And once we have those goals and the scale in mind, then we can start figuring out budgetarily how much it's gonna cost.
Can you give us like a general range, like from like very basic to like Cadillac plan?
We could spend anywhere from 75,000 to 250,000 easily if we were gonna go all out, redefine every city process into an online option. And keep in mind too, that those are the initial build costs.
Yeah.
You have ongoing maintenance costs.
No, of course.
You have project management costs, for example, because the city may need, or the committee may need to decide on determining and hiring the services of a professional website project manager who knows how to sort of navigate and run interference between what we want to do and what's, realistic. So the costs grow based on the scope is the best way I can explain
No,
it.
yeah, but yeah, that's a good way for us to see, your basic model to your deluxe
But with
model.
this initial funding or the seed funding, I see us being able to get through the door, begin the discussions, come up with a qualified bid, to reach, potential.
So the 25 grand should be a good starter just to get us going.
Exactly.
Okay.
And
Exactly.
what line item is that again?
There was two different ones. He said from 5,300, there was 10,000 there, and from 5,510, there would be 15,000, so 25,000 total. And he suggests that goes to city administrations, which we're not covering tonight, but I'll probably be going over that with Ben.
So 25K to the new website.
Right.
Mhm.
And those are reflected as reductions in those two line items on my 2021 request.
So the other thing to maybe get there is, because this is gonna be a citywide, project that we've talked about for the last several years, is possibly taking a little bit of money from some of the other the other departments to get us to achieve that goal as well. Because it's gonna help everybody out in the long run, but it's, you're not a revenue stream.
Right.
You're an expense, so looking at some of the other areas of the revenue stream that we could just, it's not gonna be a lot of money, but a little bit would help to get us to achieve that goal.
To bridge 2 points that you just made, beyond just departments, that same model can be adopted to the township and the health department. Because there's so much overlap between what they do and what the building department does, where if we were sitting down citywide and we wanted to create the definitive source of web content for all services, that will no doubt include the health department and the township. So budgetarily, we should have those discussions
Yes.
to see what they can do so that we can bring down our costs and sort of spread it around. Okay, so we are into professional services now. Professional services, this isn't a very large item because we, by practice, don't depend on external contractors very much. We like to do our work in-house. You get a much better return on investment when you invest in your employees versus hiring out contractors. But there are occasions where we do need to use those. There isn't much change for next year other than a reduction because I don't see too many large projects coming along down the line in 2021 for us where we would really need the help of a professional service. So that's actually proposes a reduction from 25 down to 15, which is 10 of the money that's being redirected for the website.
And then you mentioned before the meeting, just so everyone knows, during COVID, one of the things that IT took on, which went above their budget, was basically wiring everything, especially with cameras and in the council chambers, and obviously in this room, because we're utilizing it right now, just to make it so people can see all of our meetings. So that was an extra expenditure that you didn't see in last year's budget that they incorporated anyways, just because of the need that was there, so.
Right.
Can we expect other remote participation expenses, given that COVID game changer, just in the way we do business?
There's more I would like to do. Where I feel we are short right now isn't with all of you as elected officials or us as appointed officials. When we bring in somebody to present, whether it's a third party or our auditors or whatever the case may be, we don't have that bridge built yet to where we can funnel presentations into the live streams. But to do that, we're talking about another fairly significant expense. So since the emergency or the crisis required us to digitize our processes to accommodate elected officials and staff, the next logical step would be retrofitting what we have to accommodate streaming in people who come to present into our live stream.
PowerPoint.
Anything like that, yes, PowerPoint
Projections,
videos.
yeah.
And that's something we know is gonna be a problem,
Mhm.
but when we said this is what the money that we have to correct this issue, we knew we didn't have the funding to go all the way. But for 2021, again, it's gonna come down in some respects to what all of you feel are important goals to reach as a council. Because if you all wanna do it, I'm more than happy to technically orchestrate it.
Okay.
Where are we at now? Repairs and maintenance. Hardware maintenance and software maintenance. Traditionally, these accounts are reactive accounts, so we have certain costs that are fixed in terms of software renewals that we pay for maintenance services and agreements. That allows us to retain support relationships with third-party vendors who we function with for operations. These accounts consolidate those costs into 3 accounts. So what we're looking at doing for 2021 is we are actually increasing the hardware maintenance costs because some of our equipment is getting older, so there's a slight bump up in terms of costs on that for 5,000. But the software maintenance is actually coming down somewhat. Yeah, I don't have any significant changes anticipated for those 2 lines for next year.
Good.
The next important point is something that went through the council in 2020. You all might remember, we did a Dell server lease for 3 years for a replacement of our central data processing centers, both at the police station and here. And we got it approved, we made our first payment, now we have 2 more years left to pay for this lease that we purchased. So in this budget, what I've done is I've made reductions to our hardware purchasing, our software purchasing, because this cluster includes software, and our infrastructure lines to the tune of 40,000 to cover the cost of our newly filed lease payment. So while we incurred the new expense in 2020, and we have 2 remaining years, we are not increasing 40,000, we are reducing our existing budgets to accommodate the $40,500 payment that was passed through the council in 2020. So that is the 4th of 5 points highlighted on the first page here. So those reductions can be seen in 165510, 5515, and 5530.
Did, you talk about that last bullet point with the phone system?
Yes, this is another thing that's sort of dear to my heart. The phones that we have here now, when I took over this position in 2008, there were 7 different phone systems that powered all the facilities. None of them were connected to each other. Everybody had to dial out just to reach the other firehouse. So you can imagine what our phone bills looked like if we were charged a few pennies every time one of the firehouses had to call another one. So in 2008, 2009, we put the first, what we call voice over IP system in. That's a computerized IP-based phone system to basically save costs by converting your voice systems into more data prone. But that system now is approaching 13, 14 years old. So it's becoming increasingly expensive to maintain. We're losing 20 to 50 phones a year that we have to replace. So I'm seeing 10% growth in maintenance cost on this system as we move forward. What I've done with our infrastructure line, by making some other changes with AT&T, is we've freed up approximately $30,000 in our infrastructure budget to begin the study of migrating from what we call an on-premise phone system, in other words, literal equipment that's in our server rooms, to a cloud-based phone system. If we can do that, we'll adopt a software as a service model where we're paying a small fee to pay for that service, as opposed to absorbing large hardware purchasing costs. So the idea is to run our phones over the course of the next 5 to 10 years at a fraction of what we pay now to maintain old hardware. There are also a couple of significant limitations with our phone system that's in play now. When we get to multi-language support, when we get to the ability to reach people through alternative methods, we see some bottlenecks. Again, this is a technology that is 13, 14 years old. You may just think about how much has changed in the past 15 years. So I'd like to explore in 2021 as my only real capital project, the replacement of our phone system with a cloud-based, cheaper solution that encompasses all of the needs of today and hopefully tomorrow. So we can make decisions about purchases that in the most directed fashion, reach the farthest depths of diversity throughout the city.
Good.
Okay. Okay. And your expenditures, your increase over 22, 23, and 24, primarily driven by 2% CBA. That's a CBA increase for employees, right? CBA mandated union bargaining agreement.
My department are not unionized, but we absorb typically the same costs, especially for miscellaneous payroll-related expenses, not just salary. And that's primarily the difference. It's the cost to do benefits, the cost of payroll insurance and all the
I
other
see. Okay,
things
so,
that go along.
all right. Okay.
See, the one thing I'll say though, it's very difficult for me to anticipate 3 years down the line because technology is moving so fast and we try to stay updated. We also don't know what kind of disaster type situations we might be in that would necessitate a change in direction. So we can conservatively say this is where we'd like to be for 2022 and 23, but we really won't know hard numbers until we get into next year, then on to the next one.
Great.
Plus, there's a contribution as far as, not only with the BDC, but we also have the situation with the PD as well as the library support services that are
Yes.
related with ours.
Yes, we share salary responsibility.
Okay, great.
Good.
Any questions before I leave my voice?
No, good job. Good
So
job.
really that last bullet point, that's happening in
Yes.
20.
Yes, Cynthia.
Hi, thank you very much. That was great. Tim, could you elaborate a little bit? You mentioned, just to piggyback on technology is moving so fast, and you mentioned the training that is available. I do believe in order to mediate some liability, if we really leverage that training for cybersecurity, is there, and you mentioned that there's no additional cost, which is great. Are we tracking or requiring some to take that training?
Yes, the system is entirely managed. So every user, based on their city email address, receives assignment for courseworks, and this system actually tracks each class individually, how long each employee spent in the class. Because we've had a few that just click right through it all, and they're forced to then retake it, when I saw that you completed a half-an-hour class in 25 seconds. So it's very granular, Cynthia, and as long as we commission you a City of Berlin email account, and I think we actually have one for you.
Right.
I know Alderman Noack has one. So we can create that, and then I can extend that training to all the elected officials as well. And just for the point of statistics here, we have a couple of shifts in the fire department that have not yet completed it, but other than that, every city staff member has completed it, that have computer access. The guys and gals, guys in public works that don't use computers obviously aren't privy to this, but then they don't have network access anyway, so.
Good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. And then just the last bullet point, that's being implemented in 21,
Which one?
the migration of the PBX system.
Hopefully, yes. That'll be a full-blown bid process. What I'd like to do is explore and get some idea of the hard numbers involved, and then we'll construct a bidding document and try to compete, try to get vendors competing for our business, and hopefully get that done.
Excellent, great. Okay, any questions, Alderman?
No,
Okay.
good job. And thanks for getting us kind of up and running during the pandemic on video and so.
Oh, no problem, but like I said, I would request that you all as a council discuss how far we should go in continuing to digitize our processes. And if you want us to consider the next step, where we digitize procedures and presentations, it's totally possible, but we'd have to sit down and see what kind of money's available.
Is that, so you have that partially budgeted or somewhat anticipated, or would it have to be an increase to your budget if the city council decided to do that?
It would be an increase to what we have on place, because I did not anticipate
Okay.
the next step up from there.
Okay, all right. And then what line item would that be in, just out of curiosity, if you were to?
Would that be a
if you were
hardware
to
one?
give them that?
It would be hardware one, yes, or professional services, for example, if we decided to contract the project out to a third party entirely. With the last round, we did the labor ourselves internally, we just bought equipment and software solutions, so it touched a few different accounts.
Okay, so then what you have budgeted for those following 3 years wouldn't be enough to do it. You'd have to increase, let's just say 22, 23, and 24, that 20,000 and 60,000.
That would be like a capital expenditure.
So the 80,000 annual, So if you were told to do it in 22 or 23,
Yes.
are these monies adequate for that? Or would you need more?
The short answer is we would probably need a little more.
Sure.
The long answer is projects, especially professional services, in my mind, are negotiated year by year. So a certain amount of money exists to determine which priorities are, or which projects are priorities. And if the council decides this is number one priority, then that same number can go to the top of the list. So we wouldn't necessarily need to ask an increase. That's why it's difficult for me to go 3 years out, because things change so much year to year. So these are budgetary estimates, basically numbers we would use to make sure we get by. So if the direction comes from the council that this is what we want to see, then I'll make sure it's a priority and reflexive in my 2021, 2022 numbers.
Okay. Just worried how that question would be asked and maybe not just forgotten maybe from this meeting going on. So, open to suggestions so that, very easy for us to forget about it, right?
If I can make one more point, we can parlay this discussion into the website redesign. Because at the end of the day, they're all branches on the same tree, right? So if we sit down and we talk about the scope of what the new websites look like and social media looks like, that's gonna, by definition, include streaming. So any expansion to existing services will find their roots in that project. Which
Okay.
again was why I think it's the right idea to run that under the administrator's office so that they can reach out to all the other departments affected and say, this is a priority for you now, let's get this done.
So I'll give you everyone the heads up, it sounds like I'm gonna have to increase my budget to accommodate this.
There you go.
That it's not being realized, so.
So what
I
might
don't wanna
help too,
surprise anyone.
what might help too is kind of put and work on it is put like a 5-year plan, capital plan on IT and where you see us going and where we need to be. Because you've been always very, good about your budget, but it's really, are we on the right track? Are we still in the dark ages, or are we moving forward, and how can we move forward, and what kind of plan is that? And what kind of technology do we need to put within the next, 5 years, 3 years, 2 years, or what have you?
Typically, I participate in larger citywide capital plans, but I mean, I can put one together specifically for IT. I just usually tap on to the ones that we do for general government.
Sure.
Yeah, and ours, the current one goes through the end of this year, and then I've already started talking to Schiller and some department heads to start figuring out how we wanna do the next capital
Sure.
projects.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you, Jim.
Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
Good job.
Okay, so at this point in the meeting, we'll be transitioning to the building department, and I will be turning it over to building director Chuck Lazara and Ben Dage.
Thank you. Okay, do you have paperwork to read then?
We do.
There's,
Check out the financial reports for the building department. Let me just get that. And meeting previously with Director Lazara on the building department budget, it's important also, like in previous years, to look at some revenue streams that are not necessarily captured in Building Director Lazara's budget, but they're intertwined. And, those areas that we're looking at, if you look at the first page that has fewer line items, it's the revenues pertaining to taxes and units and certificates of compliance. First of all is, how things are going into revenue streams for real estate transfer taxes. It's obviously as you're looking at the report, you start in 2017 with 1.9 million, then it really jumps in 2018 to 2.3, 2.1, which gave us comfort in setting a budget of 2.25. Well, then COVID hits, and going through how revenues are tracking thus far, we're just underneath $1 million with about 4 months to go in transactions. And Chuck, if you could just go through your perspective on how things are going now.
well,
Yeah.
You know, back when we were doing really well, you know, 17, 18, gradually increasing, well, actually, we went back down in 19, but that was the prime time when the housing stock and when everything, unfortunately, when everybody's homes were being foreclosed on, and majority of these people never should have gotten loans. You know, it was not a good situation for people, you know, so, but that's completely changed now. Things have slowed down significantly. The housing stock is not there anymore like it used to be. The amount of flippers we've seen in town has decreased substantially because, you know, when these guys are buying houses to flip, they're looking for a house hopefully under $150,000. Typically, if they can't find that, they're gonna let that house sit there. Now what we're finding is a lot of these houses that a lot fewer homes are becoming available, and the ones that are, they're asking a premium price for them, even though they haven't been upgraded in 30-something years. So not only did COVID hurt us, but the fact that the housing stock just isn't there anymore is the main reason why we're so much lower. You know, I could maybe project that possibly we might, what did I say, Ben? We might,
We did it, 2 million for next year.
yeah, and then, you know, possibly we may get to 1.3 this year, not knowing where we're at, you know? But it's difficult trying to compare the previous 3 years to what happened here in 2020. You know, it's very different.
2020 actual amounts are through 75% of the budget, right?
I'd say between 65 and 70%. Yeah.
So my speculation may be a little high, but obviously we'll be substantially higher than the 980,000 we're at now. I'd like to see us maybe hit 1.5 or something if possible, but it's just too difficult to tell. And it has been slow. Although now we're busy because everyone wants to get all their concrete and stuff done before the winter, it has been slow during COVID. It really has.
The one thing though, during COVID, it was only 1 week where real estate transfers weren't going through, is that correct? I mean, that was.
To be honest with you, Ruth, I don't even know if it was an entire week. I mean, we never stopped doing what we were supposed to be doing. You know, in fact.
Yeah, we had to take a whole new look at how to do it.
Right, and in fact, there was a period of time where nobody was coming to do business at all because they weren't aware that we were still open. I mean, we had people calling us just assuming that we hadn't been open. We're like, well, we've been here the whole time. I mean, and we have on our website how to get a permit.
Yeah.
Which was super helpful.
And we
you
set
know.
up for safety precautions.
Yeah,
especially
everybody
at the
up
beginning.
here, you know, Claudia, you, were very helpful with all that stuff. Otherwise, people wouldn't have known what to do.
Yeah.
And we made some nice changes with what we've done outside. Was that your or Claudia's idea with all
Yes.
the information center and stuff?
Yeah, that was mine.
I think that was really helpful.
Yeah.
People appreciate
It's used
that. I
every
see
day.
people out there looking at it, getting their stuff, and getting back in their car and leaving. So,
So that was one
I
of
think it's
the,
doing what it's supposed to do.
so yeah, so we went ahead, the kiosk that you see outside, that was put in just because of COVID. A lot of people did not wanna come into the building, we had a limit at the beginning how many people come in. So each department got to choose what were their highest, asked for forms, applications, and we have set out there, so each department has at least 4 slots, and so a lot of times will just grab the things from there rather than come in, and
Sure.
that way they have access to it 24 hours too, 24/7.
Well, in the housing market too, I mean, it's a buyer's market, so the ones that do go on for sale are sold. It's just not as many as what the buyers are.
And from a real estate agent's perspective, I mean, the inventory is so low,
Yeah.
you get something on there right now that's quality, it's gone.
It's
2 or
gone.
3 days.
You mean it's
Doesn't
a
matter.
seller's market?
Or seller, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a
Seller's
seller's
market,
market.
sorry.
Absolutely a seller's
Correct.
market.
Yeah.
And the inventory is despairingly low.
I mean, I just went and looked at a house myself. I mean, this is a little off topic, but I went and looked at a house myself, based on some consulting that I do, and it's a gorgeous house in Berwyn. And the house is really only worth about $165,000. The guy's insisting on $210,000. It's just, you know, so it'll sit there for a while. It's gonna sit. And a lot of times, I know this guy bought that house at a tax sale. And when you have these guys that do that, that's what they do. They've got so much money, they don't care if it sits.
Yeah.
So that's not gonna help us either.
Well, this year's kind of a wash when it comes to this, and we realize that, especially when it comes to permits and such.
Yeah, this was a rough year.
Yep.
Well, let's talk about permits, let's check what's next here.
Well, good question for Ben. So these are, so this revenue, line item is, why is that not included here? And how do we correlate that to the bottom line, you know, with the, with the fund expense and revenue? So,
Well, since historically, these line items were not presented as part of the building department. They were presented in the same group of our other fines, not fines, but,
Revenue streams,
taxes and revenue streams. So, but of
They're
course.
tied directly to the
they're-
building department,
Correct,
correct?
they're related to the building department, where there's other revenue streams that are captured within the building department that we'll see as we flip the next pages.
Okay.
so.
Would we
okay.
ever think of just transferring it from one department to the other, budget?
It's possible, but the risk you run into though is comparatively then, when you're shifting things over, especially the way our budget is configured, you know, people looking at the numbers from the outside, it can become confusing. So, I mean, there's a possibility for that, but, we'd have to. take a
Otherwise, we
closer
just
look at
keep
it.
the same answer every single year,
Yeah.
it's tied there.
Yeah, right?
Right. So, with the other line items, with permits and sign inspection and compliance, for now, we're gonna keep it at the 2020 budget amounts. And then, we'll move right over from that point to.
Do we think that, I mean, you know, COVID's still gonna be going on probably after the first of the year, and who knows how long? Do we wanna drop any of those because we might not get the revenue next year that we think we're gonna get, that we didn't get this
Well,
year?
let me ask you a question, like
Well,
how badly does it reflect on me, let's say, if I project something and we don't hit that number? I mean, it is what it is. I mean, we're not really here to be making a huge profit and making money, but
Sure.
it just is what it is, you know?
I think there's gotta be a basis, like, for our projections, there's gotta be some historical basis to
Absolutely.
justify that.
Which you can
Right.
see we did, starting in 17, we gradually went up a little bit, and then we didn't quite make it in 18, but this year was a lot different.
But what
Yeah.
you'll see also is, like, a lot of times when there's a downturn in the economy, a lot of people aren't looking at selling, but they'll just keep on improving their own
Yeah,
house,
true.
because they're like, I'm not gonna be buying anything, but let me like maintain
There was
my
a
property.
lot,
keep
a
it
lot
up.
of that going on.
Right,
Yeah.
well,
And
yeah,
so, rather
yeah,
than like upgrade to move somewhere else, they'll just be like, okay, maybe it's time that I invest and do an addition. So a lot of times when the economy is down, people will just invest more in their own property.
right.
Especially, I mean, come on, during COVID, everyone wanted to make their house as comfortable as possible because they couldn't go anywhere.
Right, but you know, too, on the flip side, there's a lot of people that weren't able to do anything to their homes at all because they weren't making any money at all.
Mhm.
And that's one reason why we've been so slow.
Yep.
We would've seen a lot more people in here doing their patios and doing stuff like that if COVID hadn't hit,
Correct.
you know?
Yeah, it just kind of offsets each other.
So I know, Ben, maybe you and I could talk about this a little more,
Yeah.
maybe what we talked about earlier today was a little bit,
Maybe you wanna go back to the
maybe
2019 level?
we back off a little bit on that. I mean, if you want, you and I can talk about that, but.
On your expected revenues, you're saying?
Exactly, cause I mean, I don't wanna,
Maybe instead of taking the 2020 budget, you just move back to the 2019, which is a
maybe,
little less.
maybe, you know?
We can always be,
I mean, I'm willing to
Sure.
take recommendations, but why project something that if we really don't think we're
Yeah.
gonna achieve it?
Are we talking about?
That's the 2019 actual versus the 2020 adopted
Yeah,
budget.
I see
From
that, yeah.
from what we're getting at, 2019 actual might be more realistic as we
Right.
project.
for next year at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then stage it every year after that. so it
Gotcha.
happens.
Correct.
So, we're looking at 2.7, 2019 actual, and 2021 draft is 2.7. Are we talking, so it's the same?
It's, well,
No, for like the permits, in 2019, the actual was 127,595, and for the
Gotcha.
2020
Yeah.
budget, we pushed it up to the 140.
Right.
But we might wanna just think more conservative for next
Yeah.
year,
Yeah.
as the economy's trying to
Yeah.
recover,
Right.
and just push it back
I
down.
agree. We should
And then
really
you
be
can slightly, like you
conservative
said,
here.
Yeah.
gradually increase it, as we hope the economy will
Right.
keep on increasing over the next years.
Yeah.
And then, Ben and Chuck, just in taking these two documents, looking at them together, we're looking at a projected $1.5 million surplus for the building department, am I reading that correctly?
When you're,
I've just been doing the math off the 2021 draft, general fund 2.7 minus the projected deficit of the 1.1, right, that comes out to about, whatever that.
yeah, I mean,
equals. So
there
there's a
is
projected
an
surplus.
excess, when you're looking at the building-related revenues over the expenditures, that's fair.
Okay.
Good.
Okay, so now we go within the revenue streams that are within the building department, and they consist of primarily reimbursements and inspections. The reimbursements that take place, perhaps the first one under reimbursements, we're projecting reimbursement from the township due to the rodent situation. We received $6,000 in payments in 2020 thus far. Gives us a basis to project that amount for 21 through 24. Then the reimbursement for the buildings, maybe Chuck, if you can get into like what those revenues involved and where we're feeling, feel maybe it's best to lower those projections.
Well, again,
Yeah.
based on the activity that's been out there or the lack of, a lot of this is based on board up, any expenditures from blight fines and tickets and things of that nature. I'm not sure if we, just looking at 20 adopted, we had 95,000 actual, we're just we're significantly lower than we were in 19.
Quick question.
Well, a lot of that could be just, we were a little more, we weren't, due to COVID and people out of work and things like that, we weren't as
Right.
active trying to find people.
Are you just trying to are you just giving more warnings now before you actually ticket? Is that what it is?
Well, it's always been the way we try to operate around here, I never thought it was, I don't have a problem finding contractors and flippers and stuff like that, I don't enjoy finding residents. It only bites you in the end, it's just, I like to try to help them. Obviously, we want them to correct the problems they have, as long as they're gonna work with us. There's a very significant amount of the times that I waive fines because they've done what we've asked them to do.
Yeah, I know, even before I worked for, I got like a warning, and then I took a picture, I said I fixed it, I went to court, I showed it to them, they're like, oh, that's all we needed.
Yeah, all we want is
And
compliance,
yeah.
and I certainly don't want, the residents already kind of have a thing with me, because I'm kind of like the house police, so they don't like me telling what they can and cannot do to their houses, but.
The purpose is just to make sure our neighborhood looks good, right?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. So we try to get them to comply, and then we're happy to relinquish the fines as long as they've done what we need to. And majority of the time, they're very thankful, and it seems to reflect well upon us,
So on the reimbursements, I would like to add, I would really like to put more effort, money, and programs into the rat abatement.
Absolutely.
Because it's really been a problem for all of us.
Yep.
The city and residents, I know they've increased because of the pandemic, but we get a lot of calls and it's, it just increased in the whole Chicagoland area.
Well, Ben just said, all I get annually from the township is $6,000, okay? Now, we just got done doubling what we give Awesome Pest.
Correct.
He used to bill us $1,500 a month, now he bills us $3,000, okay? Based on a city of this size, you know what we should probably be spending to correct our road problem? Probably upwards of $300,000 to $500,000 annually. The city of Cicero does it themselves.
Yeah.
They have their own
Yeah.
city employees that do this, and they budget about $300,000 to $400,000 annually to do what they do.
Yeah, I got a breakdown of their overhead, you're spot on, that's exactly what they should.
So what line item is that, for your road
Yeah, Ben, what did we put there? Did
We saw the reimbursement, but where's the
But
actual
the
expense?
expenditures is found under 5290
Yeah, that's right.
-20.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so
There you go.
if we're spending 36,000 or budgeting 36 and we get a 6,000 stipend,
Yeah.
we're obviously not doing what we need to do.
Okay.
And I think at this point, we need to put a program together, and we need to put that in the budget or start working on that in the budget to say,
Yeah.
it's gonna cost us $150,000 a year to do proper rat abatement in the city, and whatever we need to do, or 200, and we need to do it,
You
because
know,
it's out of control, and, we're all trying, but we're not getting anywhere.
I had a brief conversation with the mayor about this, and I knew the answer before I said it, but I would love to be able to do this in-house. I wish we could come up with some money where we could bring someone in, we can maybe hire some additional people and do it in-house.
Where you're not at
Train-
the mercy of the people.
I mean, I would like to do that, but
Well,
it's
that's-
just, it's
that's
not
why-
very realistic. I don't know where we would come up with that money. I said, like, are there grants available, anything like that, but I don't,
Is
you know, I
it a
don't.
Yeah.
staff, is it
Like
a
a
staff
dedicated-
person then, that
So
would
that
be an
would be some-
alternative to 36,000?
Yes, yes, but, you would probably have, Caesar, you'd probably have one guy that kind of oversees it, and he may have 5 guys that are his inspectors. It would be an actual department, and they would need their own budget to operate.
So like for right now, one of the ones that we do in-house is our graffiti, and what's really nice is you get quick,
Oh,
I mean,
right,
quick
that is really
response.
nice.
Yeah.
You know, someone calls, someone sends us an email right online, and then we just go ahead, we forward that to the police department who does the graffiti, and it's taken care of within the next few days.
Absolutely.
And-
So, I mean, would you want something similar to that, where,
I mean, I just think it would be fantastic to be able to handle this on our own. But it's just not feasible unless we're able to come up with some monies, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I would say if you can put together kind of a program or a presentation on what,
Well, we-
how you think, if we can, I mean,
could
we,
you, like,
we
do an
know what
IGA?
Cicero does and how they
Right.
do it with barcoding and
Right.
take boxes to
Yeah.
follow through. I think we need to look at what they're doing and as well put a program, maybe a smaller scale here, because they're larger.
Right.
But we also need to get, our commercial and, our commercial and residential, or, restaurants and such on a program as
Well,
well that we need,
As,
the health department to do as well.
as
So
I
it
think,
should be a com-
we are implementing that currently.
Mhm.
We're going to, that's something we're working with Tony Perry with, we're going to be requiring that as part of their business license application. They have to have a reputable company that's providing them with some sort of pest control service.
So maybe what we should do is have a kind of another meeting about this, but I think, or we can do it in council. We did a rat abatement meeting several years ago and put some recommendations, but there was no teeth to it.
Right.
And I think now we need to really act on it to say, we want a program, this is what it's gonna cost, and this is what we need to do to put that program together.
And you know, I'm not sure if you guys know this, but the mayor and myself, we met briefly with another company that we thought maybe we would be able to bring in and help us with this. After we met and talked with them and let them know what our needs are, you know, what Joe does for us, Joe from Awesome does for us, is kind of like a specialized thing. He is very hands-on, and he responds to our phone calls, and we'll go to a house and, you know, visit with the person, find out what the problem, he's very hands-on. This other company was like, we can't do that.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be able to do that.
He actually gives reports
I mean-
of blight as well, and not to get off subject, but the blight and the rats, they're hand in hand.
It's huge.
Where you're
It's-
finding
it's
blighted
very similar,
areas,
correct.
you're finding the burrows in there.
Correct.
So it's hand in hand, and instead of us out here spinning our wheels, I think, like you said, there, conversation needs to be had, that we sit
Yeah,
down
and-
have.
And follow up, I
Can we
think
go ahead
the key thing that we don't, we do follow up in a way, but we need to just follow up. And like I say, if there's a block that's bad,
Yeah.
should be weekly, and we need an in-house person, inspector, to, sometimes you gotta knock on those doors and really talk to the
And
owners of that house or the property. It might not be their fault that they have rats,
Right.
The elderly.
but they
and
just
that.
kinda traveled from.
But they know what's going
They
on,
traveled and they
they
went-
see where they're coming from,
Yeah.
you know, they know.
And the thing is, this is more a health issue than anything, so if
Right.
anything, maybe
Sure.
we can do an IGA and tell the health department,
I
hey,
mean-
are you willing to help us expand this? That way, the city doesn't have
Yeah.
to take on the whole expense itself.
Sure.
But it's definitely a need, and we see it recurring all the time with complaints coming in on, different social media, on our websites, that it is a problem. We've had, I remember Alderman Avila, he had his committee, they had the recommendations. But if anything, it really needs to be a partnership between the two entities, because
Sure,
it is definitely a health issue.
Yeah.
And the city shouldn't be taking on the majority of the burden, as it's health related.
I agree.
It's blight, health,
Yeah.
it should be nice
Sure.
if we
Yeah.
equally split it
Yeah,
and see what we
correct.
can do. So
And
now
at
that
the same
there's a,
time, at the same time, we can also find out if there is an elderly resident that might need senior services, helping mow or clean up some.
And see, and that's something that my inspectors do. I have all my inspectors,
No.
I tell them, before you write someone a ticket, I want you to knock on the door and find out why this house looks the way it does.
Sure.
Absolutely.
And if we find it's an elderly person, then we help them.
Yeah.
If it's just some guy, cause he's lazy, then there's a whole other story.
Absolutely.
Cause I don't like writing tickets to people that can't afford to fix their house, then they get a ticket. That's why when we send tickets over and over, that's why when we finally talk to somebody, the first thing, oh, well, I never got them.
No.
Cause they don't know what to do.
Sure,
You know?
No.
So maybe what we can do is kind of reinvent the ad hoc committee and get that going and have some meetings with, or a new ad hoc committee and get some meetings going, maybe not for this budget, but I think we need to start talking about it, because
Yeah.
And
it is
you know,
something that's out of control.
getting back to that other company, I'm not sure how many companies out there do like outdoor rodent control. It can't be easy, and it's probably very specialized.
if anything, maybe we could just utilize, we're part of the West Central Municipal Conference, we can just ask them to
Mhm.
send out, a survey to the different municipalities and just ask them, who do you use for, pest control, if you
Sure.
do, or.
Well, I think what I see is it should be a combo of our staff, and if we have to hire staff, and a vendor, if it's gonna be a vendor, or take it in-house, but we still need our staff, so we
Correct.
need, there needs to be a program, and that's
Absolutely.
the key thing, so.
I agree.
And it's gonna cost us money,
Yes, it is.
and it's not gonna get any better.
Yeah, someone to monitor expediting each
Exactly.
job and
Yeah,
keeping
and
track. of
Keeping
how-
track of,
Yeah.
almost a map, almost like, hey, where are they going to? Cause if
'Cause
they
they
go to
move.
one area, or if they're gonna go to
Yeah, they
another,
move.
and instead of just spinning our wheels and just getting calls or whatever from residents, getting ahead of the problem instead of following it is gonna be advantageous for the city, so.
Okay.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I mean, so we're not increasing this budget line item based on this conversation.
No.
But I
No.
do think that in maybe even 22 and 23, I think maybe that could be revisited.
Mhm.
And maybe even starting with a professional consultant that can provide a program, because I think what we're doing is we're asking vendors, and each vendor
Yeah.
has a specialized solution.
Yeah.
And I personally don't know if hiring somebody would be the answer,
Right.
because
What do you mean?
in-house,
Yeah,
because
right.
then the problem rises and falls, right?
Sure.
And now it falls, you're doing such a good job, and, now there's a person that's on, is that a temporary
Mhm.
position,
Yeah.
is it a 1 year, 2 year?
And
So.
that's why I think it would be helpful, I think maybe when we do wanna have this conversation, I think we should meet with the people from Cicero and see what they do during the
Yeah.
off-season with their people.
It's definitely good to check with the different municipalities,
Right.
because this is
Check with
obviously
their
not.
branches.
You know, Cicero being bigger, they may flip-flop them over to being like public works people, but here we wouldn't be able to do that.
And I think, paying for somebody to lay out a program, a professional that ideally doesn't do pest control. I think
Yeah.
is the best, most objective way to take a look at it.
So that might be something that if we are gonna do that, is that might be a budget item that if we have to spend
And for
$5,000 or whatever,
$10,000, yeah,
for somebody to come in and do this,
$5,000,
this is what we should do, yep.
you get a real concrete game plan
Right,
that's
sure.
rooted, and that gives us options.
And, yeah, someone that really doesn't have any skin in the game, they're just gonna give us their actual.
Exactly,
Right.
yeah.
The other thing too is, we probably need to look at as we move forward in the committees or whatever, is some teeth to our ordinance as well.
Absolutely.
Because we have a big issue cleaning people's yards. We don't do that, and if they don't do what they have to do, it just continues.
Now, do you mean all of our ordinances or just
Or
these?
just basically for this. I mean, it could be looking at other things, but that's the key thing. I mean, you can have the burrows in somebody's yard, but if we can't go in that yard and do anything, or
Right.
there's piles of stuff or whatever,
Right.
they're just gonna keep going there.
Absolutely.
So we need some teeth to our ordinances.
But that's
to
one of
kind
your issues that you've always had, I mean.
Yeah,
It's always been one of those things, and
We have
we really
houses
don't
that-
have an answer to it.
You have houses that you fine and fine and fine, but really when it comes down to it, all you can do is possibly put a lien on the place, right?
Right,
But
right.
then
That's
that process, and by the time they actually sell the place.
Exactly, that could be,
Yeah.
that's not helping the
So
problem.
Right.
there's really, it's
Wow.
hard for us to actually address it and
Right.
actually do something that would give it teeth, because I think the best concept that we've ever thought of was just doing a lien, and
Yeah,
that's.
but that does nothing
But,
until
but,
10
but,
years.
but you still gotta look at it, you know?
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of times, even though I really don't like to do this, but there's times where I'm forced to send someone to maintain someone's property,
Yeah.
even if they live in it. I send someone, and I have a police officer arrive there too, and we cut the grass and we trim the trees. It's like, at least, yeah, granted, I'm generating a bill that we may not get till they sell their house,
No.
but it's gonna alleviate all these phone calls we get every day.
Yeah, you're being considerate to the
It's,
residents.
it's like, what do I do? You know, it's a difficult situation.
So if we can add into this year's budget, or next year's budget, kind of I don't know.
A line item
A
for
line item
consultants,
just
if
for
you
the
will.
consulting part of it.
2022, line
yeah.
item 5290, that would increase by what, 10,000?
Do you want it in?
Yeah, I don't know what it would cost, so I
Do
mean.
you want it in 2021, just to find a consultant, so we can start working on
Yes.
this?
Yeah, why don't we?
So not in
Right.
2022, I mean, it's obviously.
No, I would say that we need to start moving on this, so.
Yeah.
I agree with that, yeah,
Just
I
put
would
together
agree
the
with
game
that,
plan.
yeah, for 2021, and then you could, I don't know what that is, 5,000,
Yeah,
10,000.
whatever it is, there's gotta be somebody out there.
Yeah, there was somebody that I did come across during the whole rec committee, era, with that. And, they were for hire, and they were
Yeah.
consultants.
Could you pass that on to me?
I'll be looking for that, I don't know.
Send it to me?
Yeah, if I can do, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a moving in the right direction.
It's not that we're going after our residents, because as we know, as aldermen, it's the same usual suspects that are having overflowing garbage cans and whatnot, 9 times out of 10, they're landlords, they're not residents. So,
Right.
like I said, streamlining it and doing this, it'd be a huge help.
Gotta do it,
Yeah.
save us a lot of time.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay,
So yes, getting back to, we talked about lower the reimbursements for board ups and, given the current activity, our inspections as a result, are trending down.
Everything's down.
Yeah. And we're gonna have to go.
I don't think we'll get back to normal till 22,
Exactly.
right? I don't think that'll be a real,
Yeah.
we won't be able to tell in 21, because COVID will still be here. So maybe
Exactly.
22, we might get kind of back to normal, but we may not ever get
Yeah.
back to where we were in 18 and 19. I don't think we will,
Yeah.
unless we have another round of foreclosures.
Well, the only good thing is that interest rates are really low.
Right. No, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so therefore, as we've talked about with the fines, Chuck, you had mentioned with the residents, we try our best to work with the residents through that, and if they're complying, we're inclined to, be more forgiving of the fines versus the flippers and so forth.
Correct.
And as a result, we budgeted 215,000 in 2020, we're gonna go down to somewhere around 150,000
Yep.
in that category for now,
Okay.
for that. Moving over to the expenses side, the staffing, salaries and wages, talking further with Chuck, we pointed out that Chuck the building director is operating on a reduced staff. Our projection is lower than the 2020 budget, and of course, their existing staffing levels are lower than expected. As a result, this is in the age of, in this year with COVID happening, members of Chuck's team has been, put in a position where they've had to work overtime because of the reduced staff.
Yeah, we've had, I typically in the past did do overtime. It has come up where I've had to use, it seems like it's always the same employees that are always willing to come to work, like during COVID, we didn't force anybody to come in. We had people that didn't want to come in at all, so I had Shannon in here all the time, I had Helen in here all the time, and I just thought it was necessary to pay them for their time rather than give them time off or something. People need to feel valued, So, also though, one thing I have been doing is cross-training all of my inspectors so that everybody can do each other's job. So I think that's important.
Yeah.
if we are short-staffed or something like that, you know, I have Lily working as a compliance inspector now. She actually came around and is doing a good job for me with that now. We have been pretty busy with compliances. Kind of odd to me, we've been busy with compliances, however, you know, our numbers are down, you know.
I think a lot of people are trying to get in before the election.
Now, correct.
With the rates.
Correct.
So that's what I've seen in the field.
But, yeah, you know, so I haven't cross-training people, so everyone knows each other's jobs. If we ever have a problem with, you know, I've had a couple of my employees have had COVID already. Marissa's gonna be back on Monday. Okay? But other than that, when we are short-staffed, we're set up pretty good so that other people know the other people's jobs.
Sure.
And as we mentioned previously, the related health insurance, dental insurance, 5% increase for the health insurance for now, but we will await February's rates to be proposed sometime in February as to what the true increase is gonna be for health as well as dental and life. And moving over to beyond the payroll and related costs, we have our general operating costs. And those levels, we're inclined to keep at the 2020 budget levels for now, in that regard. Then moving forward, and that's your telephone, that's your supplies, your training, dues, postage, all that, we're gonna just keep at the 2020.
Just so you know though too, a lot of my inspectors have decided to start using their own phones. So I'm gonna be reducing this bill fairly substantially. So I'm working on that now. I haven't done it yet, but we're getting rid of most of the phones.
Are you gonna reimburse them for anything?
They didn't bring it up. They're okay just using their own phone.
Okay.
You know, I discussed it with them at length. They say, sure, they're all fine. With the amount they use them and the plans they have, they're not worried about it. And actually, their own phones are better. They can actually take pictures with those and send them to me. The old phones, they really couldn't do that.
And just a quick question, just as far as the service, when they're calling the residents, say they're at the home for an inspection, I think they're calling, so the number is showed, so the residents know that it's them calling, it wouldn't be like an unavailable call.
We've never had a problem with that.
Okay.
And usually, I think what they do is they make their calls from City Hall, I think,
Okay.
before they leave in the morning
Okay.
typically. But that's a good question.
Okay, thanks.
And then we talked about other general expenses and the road and abatement. We're gonna, we initially projected 36,000, but at this point, we're inclined to raise that up another $10,000 for now.
Yeah, that's for us to look for a consultant who
Yeah.
can look at our whole plan and how it's best to move forward to address it, whether we outsource contract or bring in-house.
And even with rent abatement, you can do it where if it's gonna cost us this, what kind of revenue we can get from it as well.
Right, right.
I mean, that's kind of where we have to look at sometimes in our budgets is how much revenue we get and how much are we getting and then how much is it costing us? So we can kind of weigh that out. Not like I said, we don't wanna ticket everybody, but we wanna get this under control.
Corresponding increase in fines related to blight, and maybe instead of saying, hey, it's $75 or $50, the leniency portion is, you know, maybe it's less than that,
Yeah,
right?
right,
But it's
yeah.
assessed and, you know, it doesn't, again, it's a softer fine, but
Yep.
again, that would help pending, you know, what this potential consultant could tell us.
Yep.
Sure.
Okay.
Then we get into the professional services, and normally that's a function of the inspections revenue. The cost passes through,
Correct.
and because we're lowering our outlook on the inspections, we also have to lower the professional services expenditures in tandem with that. So that's lowered to 300,000.
Yeah, that's much better.
Yeah. Then we get into repair and maintenance. Chuck, is there any sort of anticipated issues with the building?
Anything major?
Yes, anything?
No.
Is that only for City Hall, that line item, or is it?
Normally, it's normally.
Yeah. No, but as you know, like, it's all reactionary, you know, you never know what's gonna go on, but we do have a new boiler system. We have no issues with that now. Couple minor issues with the roof, but, even though the roof is not under warranty, it's nothing drastic, we don't need a new roof. Just need some repairs every now and then. So as far as something substantial that I could foresee, there's really nothing, no.
And the only other thing I wanna just point out that, you know, Chuck's department has incurred some COVID-19 expenditures, and obviously with us submitting our application for the CARES Act, as well as FEMA, we anticipate that cost to be absorbed in some fashion. So, and of course, 21 through 24, it's very difficult to determine the true expenditure on the
Right.
COVID-19.
Okay.
Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
All right, okay, well, thank you very much again, and moving over to Recreation Department. You're welcome to stay, Chuck.
I'd rather not. I appreciate.
On the off chance that you wanna stay, you're more than welcome.
I appreciate the invite, but I'm gonna, I'm gonna go to dinner and bring dinner home. All right,
Thank you, Chuck.
everybody, have a nice
Thank you. Good
evening.
night.
Have a good evening.
Oh, I thought you had something for me.
No, I wish I did.
Next time, Chuck.
Right.
All right. All right, you guys, have a nice evening.
You too. Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you.
And now we will go over the Recreation Department budget, which we were able to just talk about with Director Tony Martinucci. And as we looked at that department, obviously COVID has been has cast a major blow on the operations of the rec department and of course, with some of the programs and so forth. We were anticipating overall revenues to be $500,000 and with many of the programs being closed down.
Is that 422503?
40,
Actually, the bottom line, 4400, right?
Correct.
Yeah, yeah.
Correct. And the big question is.
One thing to note though,
Yeah,
so your revenues were down, the pool was closed, we had no day camp, nothing like that, but at the same time, if you take a look at the salaries and expenses,
yeah.
that was majorly down too, because we didn't have to hire any
Sure.
staff
Sure.
whatsoever during the spring to the summer, so we've been on majorly reduced staff.
Sure.
So please take that into account when you're looking at those numbers.
Well, and this department's not a big money getter anyway,
It's not,
So,
no.
it's really a pass-through.
Yes.
This is basically just, we're offering these services to our residents,
Mm,
and that's about it, and one of the biggest services we've actually cut down, we didn't have the pool, our day camp, after-school, care camp, which was before, it was very growing, and then we haven't had any of our senior, programming through
Yeah.
there, and that was since the spring.
Mhm.
So at the same time, our revenue hasn't been coming in, but we haven't been able to do anything when it comes to the services too, so they kind of wash each other out for this past year. But we're gonna assume that hopefully next year our pool will be open again. And so we're gonna have to get back into that.
Preparations for
In preparation, that's why you're gonna see, we're not reducing major reductions for next year when it comes to those, because we're gonna assume that COVID, we're eventually gonna get a vaccine. And hopefully by next summer, I'm sure everyone's gonna be wanting to get back to socialize again after this year.
Yeah, and especially as treatments become better also, not only with the
Yeah.
vaccines and learning, so. Yes, in essence, that we will focus more on being back to the 2020 budgeted levels in the revenues. And of course, the expenditures, will fall in suit with that also. Bear in mind with salaries and wages, we do have members, that are under union contract, and that is currently under negotiation. for now, we'll project a 2.5% increase, but of course, that is still pending with the union contract negotiations. And of course, we talked about the health insurance and as well as the dental insurance, subject to the true increases that will be received sometime early next year. And then from that point, with those, with most of the expenses being consistent with the 2020 budget, the one thing that we will point out is that there was a capital outlay budget in 2020 that obviously with school, the closing of programs, that
So
that money was
basically,
spent.
their facilities was closed for a while, their construction projects got pushed off.
Yeah.
The money that was put aside, they're gonna start their projects,
Yeah.
this fall.
Okay.
And it'll probably get finished by the spring, so they're just moving those
Okay.
dollars that were
And that's
going to be
54
allotted
budget?
earlier and
Sure,
used
sure.
earlier.
Yeah.
And just, their projects are gonna start now compared where it would have been earlier. in the
What
year.
line item is that, please?
That's, 5,400?
That is the
58?
5,800, but
5,800.
on the next page,
Capital outlay?
Okay.
then the next, there's a separate page under capital projects fund, 400. That's where it lists where, there's an adopted budget of $100,000 for 2020. We're going
Now,
to,
what's identified in there again, so that?
It's just
For
a lot of, different
maintenance and stuff?
projects, maintenance, basically for the facilities,
facility
everything
upgrades.
there. They
Yeah.
were just gonna be, to do little upgrades here and there,
Yeah.
all those little projects add up. And
Yeah.
basically, they were gonna be doing it earlier, but COVID got in the way and construction got a little
Sure.
put behind, so they're starting it in the fall rather than in the spring.
And, okay, and this is relatively new, that we didn't do anything in 18, 19,
Yeah.
and then in 20, we budgeted for it, but never did anything.
They've been doing lots of projects
Yeah.
over the year, smaller ones, they just got LED lights, a couple years ago there. They upgraded through a grant, they were able to update their, bathrooms to ADA, that was a couple years ago. So they have been making, upgrades throughout,
It's just not showing up here though, that's why, so.
It wasn't put in that capital outlay.
And plus, if
No.
the expenditures are like lower than like $10,000,
Yeah, that's what I say.
it could easily
Those are little jobs.
be captured into repair and maintenance.
Yeah.
Which is again
Yeah.
significant,
Yeah.
at 6 figures, 160.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it seems optimistic. I mean, the way I read this budget, it seems that everything's gonna be back to normal by next year. And the timing of that, I mean, and that's assuming, again, I know it's a springtime thing, but again, just seems optimistic to me.
One thing to take into account also with the salaries and wages, a lot of those, summer help, when we do get them, they're part-time and we have to follow the state of Illinois' increases that they're doing.
Okay.
So that was one of the items that also, when you look at salaries and wages, all that summer help, the minimum wage is going up in the state and we have to match that because all of those were literally at the bottom.
Part of our capital plan that we talked about before is a new pool. I know we don't want to spend money, look at, but has anybody ever done a kind of a, how much will it cost to replace the pool that we do have?
Between 8 and 10 million.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you have to maintain it. you know,
Exactly.
So what, if you wanna, I'm starting to look into it, but if you wanna plan for something like that, you're gonna have to hire someone, just like we were talking about with our whole RAP program, just to see how that would go.
Yeah.
You'd have to hire someone just to go into the whole project to see, for project management, cause you're putting together a lot of things.
Sure.
Engineering, the architecture, your contractors who are doing the work.
Yeah.
So most projects like that would have a project management company.
Sure.
That we would have to first go out to bid first to tell them what we're looking for. So I'm starting to look into that, but it's definitely, and, you know, being a resident here for Berlin for, I don't know, since what, 2002, I've been here.
Right.
You know, that's the only pool that we have left in the city too. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
we just, so right now, we're just maintaining it as well as we can, but it's definitely needs
It's
to be
50
replaced.
years old or however old
But
it is.
a project like that, you have to really take into account everything that would go into it. So
Sure.
before any big project we do, you always have to do all the,
Yeah, I think the
So-
conversation's good, and then putting that,
but it is on my desk, is something
Yeah.
that I need to start working on,
sure,
but,
cause that could be something we can look out for grants and stuff like that too, through, you know, state federal. So-
yeah, and a lot of the grants, when you do apply for them, you really have to have
Yeah,
the
yeah, it's not
architecture
in
done,
place.
you have to have that, and, you know, all that stuff put in place beforehand.
Sure.
And then there's a cost to get all that, so right now, you know, obviously, you know, everyone knows we're at a deficit district because of
Yeah,
COVID.
it's
So,
a luxury. we can't,
maybe
uh,
we
afford
start
right now.
looking into going out and figuring all of that within the next year.
Sure,
You know, not right now, but
Correct.
yeah,
we need to start doing our planning
yep,
to make sure that when we do it correctly, so.
Sure. okay.
But right now, we just gotta maintain our facilities, and that's why we
Mhm.
have that maintenance that we didn't incur over this past year that we're just moving and starting at this fall and finishing in the spring.
Salaries and wages line item, what percentage of that is full-time versus the part-time?
Just eyeballing like the schedules, it could be about 60-40.
60 full-time, 40.
Yeah, with our seasonal, yeah.
Mhm.
And as you can see, the reduction thus far, where we're only like 40% of.
So do we really think that starting January 1st and trending each quarter, that we're gonna be at the same pace that we were at 2019? I mean,
It's difficult-
realistically.
It's difficult to say because you have the summer programs that start in May. And that's when we bring in all the counselors and.
But there are winter programs too, aren't there? Indoor basketball, there are certain indoor things that take place, right? I mean, the rec department is doing something between January and May, right? Or
Well,
March?
I
Or
don't know,
not?
I have to look at our state guidelines, we have to see how COVID's gonna be going. I mean, we're just always following, you know, Region 1, they're getting pushed back right now, just
So-
because there's
Yeah,
outbreaks.
and that's
So-
my point, is that I think we're too optimistic here, and, you know, the way this is set up, it reads that we're gonna be starting January 1st, doing the same things that we did January 1st, 2019, right?
2019, correct.
Because, yeah, so, that's why, again, I'm just asking the question, is this budget too optimistic? Because it assumes that January 1st, we're hitting the ground running, and we're doing the same things we're doing January 1st, 2019. That's all.
And that's where, I'm with you on
You
that.
know, and
I'm with
so-
you on that.
And so I think it needs to be looked at again.
Yep.
And again, let's revisit this because, you know, especially salaries too, those are the two biggest things. The revenue is gonna be down, at least 25%, cause this whole the whole next quarter, the first quarter of 2021, I mean, no one has a crystal ball, but it's right around the corner. Do we
Yeah.
really think we're gonna be up at 100%?
Well, it
Probably
also
somewhere
all
right
depends on
below
the schools too, because, you know, how are the schools planning for this? Because all of our after-school programs are based off of the schools.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I mean, right now, at least the high school, they're like, we're not going in before October 30th, but it's just like, by January, I'm gonna assume we're gonna have schools open,
Yeah.
or, you know, as a
Maybe.
I
parent,
believe I
so.
saw they were going
So
forward with
basically,
winter
I
sports as
mean,
well, too,
if
with
they're gonna be
wrestling,
open,
basketball.
then parents are gonna still have to figure out with their kids. Our after-school programs might be there too.
Sure.
So, and then at the same time, when we did look at the salaries, something to take into account,
Mhm.
when I was talking with the recreation department, COVID's not going away, like overnight, so even if we do have summer camps and day camps, you're gonna have more counselors, because you're gonna have smaller groups for safety.
Yeah.
So he also took that into account when we were working on the
Yeah.
salaries.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, those are just little things we have to think about, like the schools, they're having higher expenses with certain things, obviously with cleaning.
Sure.
That's gonna be an expense that's gonna be maintained
Yeah.
throughout, so even though,
But you're right, there could be extra staffing requirements for the people that are coming in that might require more.
anything with kids, you're gonna have to have smaller groups, whereas they would have had, 10 before, you're gonna have to move it, to 7 or something, so then you're gonna have to hire a few more counselors, or,
Yeah.
so it
Yeah,
just,
I get it. I
So,
get it.
I mean,
And this
even
isn't
though.
something that'll fall under the cares or anything.
Maybe it
like
just
that,
needs
like-
further examination.
CARES only
Yeah,
goes
I
to the end of the
think
year.
that,
Okay.
I think
Yeah.
take another holistic look at the salaries, because even though we may have to,
Including the full-time
Increase.
ones.
yeah,
Right.
we might have to, you know, increase, say in April, May, or June. We still have that void, and I believe that void is still gonna be there in January or February,
Yeah.
that we're not gonna have activity then. It's just
And
like,
and a lot of the full-times too, a lot of them is maintaining the facilities.
Yeah.
You have to realize,
Mhm.
it's not just the recreation building,
No.
you've
There's-
got Janor, you've got the baseball alley, you've got
Yeah,
all
of course.
that. that-
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
maintenance,
Those full-timers-
exterior, yeah.
A lot of those full-timers,
Yeah.
they've been working through everything, cause a lot of it's outdoors.
Yeah.
So, where, you know, they might not be cutting grass during the winter, they're shoveling,
The shovel, right.
so.
Okay, so maybe we'll just revisit this one and we
Yeah.
take another look at it
Sure.
again, and,
Okay.
you know, and again, just taking another hard, critical look at those salaries and wages, because,
Yep.
you know, we're not starting with the year
Yeah.
up and running, and.
It'd be nice.
Right.
Everything's gonna be different,
Yeah.
that's for sure.
So the budget has to be different, great, okay. All right, okay, so, any other questions on IT, our budget?
No.
IT rec for buildings, no, nothing on rec here that we're
No.
talking about. Moving along to new business,
No.
no new
That's
business.
it.
Okay, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
second.
Second.
Seconded by, this guy right here, all right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Run.
All right.
Thanks, everyone. Good job.
Thanks, good meeting.
I'm gonna text Jim that we were done.
That's in the mayor should do it. This guy. That woman. All righty.
Thank you.
All right, good to see you.
Good to you too.
See you guys, probably Tuesday.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, just a little off there. All right, do it.
Okay, thank
See
you.
ya.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, you're right.
Oh, yeah.
Is that 2019?
That would be the 2019 levy.
Okay,
That would-
let me just go over this with you.
Go for it.
That way.